So I'm in Mudbox and I've sculpted this guy. If we look at the low-res version of our little friend here, which means I page down, this is the low-res version of him. That is the lowest res. This one's a little bit higher. That's 8,000 polygonal faces. So pretty low res, right? I mean, considering. And that translates to, it's 8,200 quads, which means it's 16,000 triangles. But he's still pretty low res. But if I go up to the higher res version, he's at about 2 million to get this level of detail. And we can see the wireframe is pretty tight. And that's the only way of getting it if I'm going to sculpt to that level. But I wouldn't want to try and animate a 2 million polygon character, right? Because no machine is going to run it properly, or if there's anything else in the scene, right? Rendering for movies, yeah, sure. I can have displacement maps that tessellate during render and do all that kind of stuff. But for right now, yeah, he's not very functional as an in-game character or an animatable character because he's just too bloody dense. That's pretty much it. So my goal would be to take this character, export out whatever textures, normal maps, displacement maps that I have, and take the low-res version of him into something like Maya, and then apply the high-res displacement and all that kind of stuff to it, right? So that I can get this, or maybe even this, to look like that, right? So let's just say this one will make it so it's a little bit easier. I mean, I could drop it down to this, you know, when we do displacement and stuff, and see what it does. Maybe we'll do both and see, but in either case. So here's how I would do it. Let's say he's all textured up, or we're just going for the normal map and the displacement, whatever it is. All of this sculpting detail is going to be output into that particular, you know, into that particular texture, those maps. So I would go in Mudbox under UV maps and maps, and I'd say I want to extract texture maps, new operation. And this is where you decide what you want to actually put out. Transfer paint layers, like from a high-res to a low-res model. Maybe I painted the high-res and I want to transfer it to the low-res version. Ambient Occlusion. Do I want an Ambient Occlusion map for a video game? That'd be kind of cool. Vector displacement. I would not do that for a whole character. It's kind of silly. But a vector displacement is basically a displacement map that I could use to sculpt. So what that means is, like, I could make, instead of remodeling ears and lips and eyes all the time, I can model one, make a vector displacement of it, and then pull it down here. And then whenever I want to make that, whatever it is, I can literally paint it on, and it will sculpt that part of the model into whatever vector displacement map I created. Right? So I could just, I could have a whole shelf of noses and ears and just say, I want to sculpt this onto it. And it would just start literally, you know, I could sculpt those directly in. A displacement map or a normal map, right? So let's say, so a normal map, you do these one at a time. Let's say I want to do a normal map. And it's asking me what's my target? 0, or I could click here and say, no, the one above it, right? So if I was trying to go super low, I could go at, you know, my target is 0, but the high res is going to be level 5, right? So super high res to super low res, okay? let's say we're gonna go, I suppose we could try level 0. That's pretty darn low, but let's see. Method, you could do ray casting or sub. I'm going to try subdivision this time. And then you decide what resolution. So right now I'm doing the normal map. And do I want to use a 1K texture or a 2K texture? A 2K texture obviously is going to give me, it's going to use up more space, but it's going to give me more detail, right? Let's just say a 2K texture. We're sending it out to Maya software, coordinate space, tangent space, and then it's asking me what's the file name and where. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to say, yeah, PNG will be fine. I'm just going to call it roboto underscore NRM for normal. 8-bit, and we say extract. Mudbox is pretty fast about that stuff, so it's already done. Now, here's the interesting thing. For me to properly, it's applied to it. That's why it looks sharper. If I actually, watch this, if I scale down, I'm a page down to the lower resolution, so that's the super low resolution with the normal map on it. If I turn the normal map off, that's what it looks like. So even though that's a ridiculously low res, we could see that actually works pretty darn good considering, right? This is all detail that is basically in the normal map, giving me these shadows and highlights and detail. If I shut it off, this is what it looks like. You notice, particularly, look at the ears. Watch this. So it's not perfect because it was low res, but if I had textures on it and I'd gone just one level higher, be like, man, that actually looks, here's the level higher of what it looks like, and we see it cleans it up a bit. Not bad, right? Considering. Now, if I did want to do this as a displacement map, then I would go in, once again, back into here, extract, texture maps, new operation, choose displacement map. And let's just say let's try it one level higher. And the source is going to be level 5, high res. By default, Maya might say ray casting. I'm going to choose subdivision. And for the displacement map, I'm going to do a few things. One, I'm going to choose a 4K texture. You see, I could go up to a ridiculous 8, 16, 32. That's a bit much for what we're doing. I'm just going to say a 4K. That's going to be pretty high by itself. I could turn on anti-aliasing, let's say level 6, and that's just so it smooths out some of the edges and it's not jaggedy. I'm going to choose a 32-bit for the displacement map. And I'm going to choose a open EXR 32-bit floating point RGB for that. And let's just call it roboto underscore DSP for displacement. So save. Subdivision, 4K, EXR 32-bit. And hit extract. It's plugging away. It'll take a little bit longer, but not much. It's pretty quick about that. And he's not that overly complicated. And this is the displacement map I would pull into Maya if I wanted to subdivide him and boost up his resolution during renders. Yay, it's done. Now, it applied the displacement map as a kind of a normal map. So it's not exactly, or it's showing it as a bump map. Let me just shut that off. See? So that's the displacement map, but this isn't a true representation of it. Okay. So if I were to pull in, like this was my low-res sculpt, then I would select him at this lower level. Let's say level 1. I'd go File, Export Selection as an FBX. And let's go. Yump and Yiminy. Fine. Projects. Loney. Scenes. Roboto. LV1. Level 1. Now, of course, the fun part is I also need to I'm just doing this so I can go quickly to where that folder is. Copy, cancel, cancel. And now I'll just put that in there. And there's my textures that I would use. I'm going to copy those. And I'm going to bring those in. Remember, they always go into the source images. And now if I go into Maya, new document, file, import, Roboto. There he is there. I assign a brand new material to him, AI standard. And if I, let me, let's set that up as skin. And let's just set him up with a light system real quick. So this is my key light. You may notice that the first time you do the Arnold render, it takes a little bit longer, because it has to like make little versions of the texture and such. And as usual, there we go. Kind of scary, but you know. And I will duplicate that. This will be my rim light. Make this a little bit stronger. Okay. So we've got this, right? He's not that impressive, you know. No offense to him, but, you know. He looks like, He looks like some sort of weird little plastic toy, right? So I'm just going to pause that, but I'm going to show you what the normal map and the displacement map does. So when I go into that material, and if I want to do a displacement map, let's just do the displacement map. You see every material has this, every shader, surface shader, has a shading group. And that's where the displacement shader would go. So if I go into that, there it is right there, displacement material. We go into there and I want to bring in a file. And it makes this displacement shader plugged in. Here's the file. And I grab that displacement texture. This is what the displacement texture looks like. Kind of weird, isn't it? It's a grayscale image, but there's so much information for levels. And then I plug that in. Now, for right now, here's the funny part. So if I just do it now, we get nada. It's not going to do much. No change. Or very subtle one, if that. Right? So here's what I need to do to make that really, I can see a little bit, but not much. So I'm going to stop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to go in to the object and go under Arnold to where there's an option for subdivision and displacement. Before I do that, I'm just going to do a file save scene as. Let's just call him Roboto, because now is the time it may start to crash on me. So I've got that, but now I can go in and change that to Cat Clark right there. And we're starting to see those details come in. You see that? They're still not there fully yet because I have to start tweaking out some stuff. Let's go iterations. Let's change that to about 4. Let's make it 3. Check that out. Do you see it starting to get those details in now? Now, when I go down to here for height, bounds padding, and all this stuff, this is where I can tweak that out. So I could increase the height. If I go too far, it's going to start to distort things. But look at those nodules on the top of his head now. Do you see that? Ew, that's just not cool. So this one actually, without much tweaking, came out pretty good. Usually you have to go in and do a lot of stuff. The bounds padding at a 0.5, I'm setting that more towards where is the flat surface. Instead of like lower, I put it at like 50% gray. And now we can see more of the contrast in there. You see that? So then you would just tweak it out. But in actuality, when we look at this guy, this is what the character actually looks like, and this is how it is rendering. So we're taking that low res and we're really through whatchamacallit, through Displacement Map, we're just tessellating it and pushing things in and out so that it looks more so like it's actual high res CG counterpart in here. And then I could just tweak it out to get it the way that I want. Right now I pushed it a little too far, but you get the idea. Cool? Now if I'm in Substance, the way I would export my texture maps out of here is once I have something textured and however I'm viewing it, I go to File, Export Textures, and then I pretty much choose what it is based off of the parameters of what I want to do. So right now, this is spitting this out, right? Base color, roughness, metallic, normal map, height map, emissive, etc., etc., etc. These are the configurations for each of these individual outputs. You have Amazon, oh, they added that, Amazon Lumberyard, which is the Amazon game engine. You have Arnold 4, variations, Arnold 5, which is what we're using, variations of that. You have other programs, CryEngine, Dota, standard PBR variations, Redshift, Unity, V-Ray, Unreal. So it really just depends on what you're trying to do, or you can make your own and just say what you want to export out, right? So if I wanted to make my own, I literally could just go in and say, oh, you know what, I want to set out a custom, this one here, and then I'm going to add which input maps I want. So I might want to diffuse. Oh, let's see, how do you do that? I forgot. Oh, that's right. So you create like, oh, I want a RGB, and then I have to decide what it's going to, like what the channels are going to be or how it's going to go. And it's kind of interesting because depending on what you're doing, you can start from, like, let's say if I went to a different one, like let's say it's this one, and we could see here what these guys are, right? You can actually go in and, move these guys, tweak these guys, decide what, RGB plus alpha, and then what are these, individuals going to be, see? So I could just say, oh, you know what, I want a grayscale image that I want to be a displacement map. So it's a displacement map. And literally start to go in and say, oh, you know what, this RGB, I want that to be a diffuse from the RGB channels, from the grayscale, from the diffuse, whatever. And you literally start to just go in and you could break it up. If you look at these individuals, you can see that's from the base color, that's from the metallic, that's from the roughness, and you assign what it's going to be. Now, if you just chose a standard like this one, right? And this was going to be your output. Then I might just take my height map and then convert that into a displacement map. So it really just depends on what it is that you're trying to do. But you can actually dissect this. And the reason they have it set up like this, let me show you in Unreal. Do you see how Unreal has this? There's a this one channel which is Occlusion, Roughness, Metallic. That's 3 separate maps, right? But you'll notice there's RGB. Watch this. R is mixed grayscale ambient occlusion. The green channel is the roughness, which is grayscale. The blue channel is the metallic. So it's piggybacking 3 textures into one, because if I go into Unreal, I would just pull out those channels and plug them into the separate attributes I needed them to be. I don't have to waste the texture space of having, oh, this one texture map is the roughness. This one texture map with 3 channels is the metallic. This one texture map is the ambient occlusion, even though it's just grayscale. So I'm keeping it grayscale. I piggyback them, and that way I'm getting 3 textures for the price of 1. And then I would just link them to, to the attributes that I wanted. So you kind of customize this based off of what you want, depending on what the output is. And once you actually have that, if I took that and then just said, let's just say we did this one, for instance, just as an example. Then I could go in and I could actually spit it out. Now there is one other thing before I do that. Let me do this. File, new. Let's just do PBR select. And I'm going to choose, this is interesting. So I'm going to actually go in and I'm going to bring in that low res guy. Roboto level 1. And let's make it a 2K, just as it is, no other textures. Hit OK, discard. Here he is, level 1, right? But I don't have my normal map for him. I don't have a displacement. I don't have ambient occlusion. Painter can generate those things I just was showing you how to make in Mudbox as well. I just need the high res and the low res. Here's my low res. If I go into Mudbox again, here's my high res version, right? And I'm going to select him again. Make sure he's at the highest mode, mode 5. There we go. File, export selection, and it's going to export it out at whatever level that I'm showing. So I'm going to say level, this one is level 5. This will be my high res, and I'm just going to grab this so I know where it's at. Save. So it's going to take a little bit longer because it's a bigger mesh. Not that much longer. Boom, it's done. And I'm in here. There's my low res, right? So check this out. I go under texture settings, scroll down, and there's an option for mesh maps, bake mesh maps. So I click here. I'm going to say none and then say, you know what, I want to create a normal map, maybe an ambient occlusion, curvature. I think that's it for right now. Okay. So there's a little, you notice there's this big, like, hey, there's a wrong sign going on there. And that's because it's saying I need a mesh to generate the normal maps and the ambient occlusion and stuff. So I could use the low res as the high res, but I don't want to do that. I want to bring in the high res. And that is going to be where I generate my normal map, my curvature, and all that good stuff, ambient occlusion. What resolutions do I want them? Let's just say 2K for right now. And as I click on these, there's different properties I could adjust, but I'll just leave it as default because it's usually pretty good. And I'm going to say bake default. So you see how it looks right now, right? Watch this. Bake default material mesh maps. So it's taking that high res, it's looking at the high res, it's looking at the low res, and it's starting to generate those maps for me. You see that? And not only is it generating them, it's plugging them in as my base. So I have got now a normal map, an ambient occlusion, and a curvature map. And he looks, now I've got the low-res version in Substance, and I can paint on the low-res version inside of here. If there was a texture map, I would have brought that in too. And I could bring that in just on a layer if I already had a texture map. And then I could start painting on top of it. But now when I export it out, it has a little more information. But now I could go in and literally just start to go to my layers and paint whatever textures, or just start off applying with a skin tone. Eek. Maybe there's a better one. Which one is that? What's that? Mouth skin. Oh, well, yeah, that would be it. Maybe not. Cover him in mouth. Yeah, it's a little, a touch much. Oh, wow, they've really added a lot more skins to this. Neck skin, leg skin, forehead skin, multiple forehead skins, facial hair skin. I'm morbidly curious now. Every time there's an update, they add more stuff, so let's see. Oh, that's not bad. So it should have like some little bumpiness and stuff like that, but you get the general idea. Calf skin? Really? That is shin skin. Now they're just being silly. Zombie bubbles skin. Okay. Interesting. But anytime I have these, I can always go in and then just vary up and change that base skin and start to do things with it, and then modify some of the channels and the things that they have on it. And then I could paint on top of that, right? As well as just starting to paint like if this is a helmet and do that kind of stuff. So, but you get the idea. And then I would do my thing, export textures. This is showing me which textures are going to be exported out for our little friend, and where they're going to export to. And then I can always go in source images, and I'm just going to make a subfolder in here called Roboto, so I can keep things more organized. So it's a subfolder in my source images, and it's trying to spit out all of those, and then I would just make it so. New folder. So there's all the different textures that are generated from it. And I would just add to it if I wanted those different ones, right? So I could just go in and add and make a variation, or choose that, you know, those presets are here. So if this one was the displacement, then we'll just call it that. Displacement. Kill these. Let's see if that works. From the grayscale. I'm trying to think, would that be grayscale or world space? I'm going to have to check. But, because like I said, I've not done it in Substance before. I know you can. I've just never done it out of it. I usually use Mudbox, which gives me a really good, and you saw how the results of it. But you could just actually put it through there. So either or. But yeah, since that's a displacement and that's in there, I'm just curious. Give me an error. I figured. Yeah, I'll just have to look at it and see. I'm pretty sure there's just a quick hit for YouTube just to crank one out of here. I just haven't done it. But that gives me something to do. Oh, that's probably where you put it. Hold on. Yep, there it is. You see this? Under texture settings, channels, we have to add the displacement in there. Now there's a displacement option. And let's see, that's a 16-bit floating. We could boost it up to a 32 floating bit displacement right there. And now I should be able to go in and export the displacement. Yep, that was it. So I just would have to tweak it out because I didn't do anything with the displacement so that it acknowledges it, but cool. So that's how to get the channel itself, and then I just have to make sure that there's actually a displacement in there. So I forgot, you have to actually create the channels that you're going to want to work with inside of here. And I'd imagine now baking mesh maps, I could probably add one. So I can double check, but I know I'm like this close to it. It's almost there. But that's pretty much it. And then you can just bring those in to start to actually put them together. Cool? But that's how you could generate, that's how you export textures out of both those programs. Bitmap to material is easy. You just export it out and make sure displacement is checked, and then it'll actually generate one pretty nice for you. So if I actually have a texture, so just case in point, oops, too many. Here's bitmap to material. I take a texture like my brick, drag it in, put it in the input, and roughness, metallic, normal, height, ambient occlusion. And once again, this one's kind of based off of like what material I'm going to use. So you actually can go in and choose a different type of material, and then these are all the channels. And then just export bitmap there. Just make sure you're at the proper resolution. Okay. Down here in the outputs is where you would turn on displacement. See that there? So now once I've turned it on in here, now I've got, there's my displacement map right there. So that's how I would actually switch that on. And then you can output that once again at a higher resolution and then change what it's set to. Cool? So I could shut everything off and then just turn on displacement, and then I'd want to choose what file format and what options. There's EXR right there. Quality 100. Give it a name. Tell it where to, and then boom, you send it out. Cool? So it looks like the only difference is it gives you a limitation in the EXR of 16-bit instead of 32, but that would still work. Okay. But yeah, so that's it, and that's how I would get the displacement map for this guy, along with any other normal map, bump map that I needed. Questions? And I'll save that out.